On the evening of April 3rd, 2008, the peaceful suburb of Nashville was shattered by the discovery of a gruesome murder. What seemed like a picture-perfect life of a housewife took a dark turn, leading to an affair that ended in bloodshed. The investigation would uncover layers of deception, betrayal, and a deadly obsession that left a family torn apart. Elena Rodriguez had always been known in her neighborhood as the perfect housewife. At 34, she had two children with her husband, Miguel Rodriguez, a hard-working construction foreman. They lived in a modest but comfortable home in a quiet suburb of Nashville, Tennessee. Elena was admired for her kindness and her dedication to her family. On the surface, her life seemed ideal. A loving husband, two beautiful children, and a cozy home. But as with many stories that seem perfect, there were dark secrets hidden just beneath the surface. Miguel, 36, had been with Elena for over a decade. He was a man of few words, deeply committed to his work and his family. His long hours on construction sites often kept him away from home. But he believed it was all worth it to provide a good life for his family. Miguel was proud of what he had built: a stable home, financial security, and a seemingly happy marriage. Elena's cousin, Victoria, had always been close to her. The two women grew up together, practically consistent, sharing everything from childhood secrets to teenage. Victoria married David, everything she had ever wanted. She felt an emptiness growing inside. Miguel was always working, often leaving before dawn and returning long after sunset. His dedication to his job, while admirable, left little time for Elena, and she began to feel increasingly. Their conversations became brief, mostly about the children or household matters. And the passion that once filled their marriage had all but faded. During this time, David Cortez, Victoria's husband, began paying more attention to Elena. He was everything Miguel wasn't: charming, attentive, and always ready with a compliment or a flirtatious smile. David had a reputation for being good with his man, but Elena had always brushed off his behavior as harmless. However, as Miguel became more absent, Elena found herself drawn to David's charisma. It started innocently enough. At family gatherings, David would make Elena laugh with his jokes, or they would have long conversations when Victoria was busy with the children. He seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings, something Elena hadn't felt from Miguel in years. The more time they spent together, the more their connection deepened. What began as friendly banter slowly evolved into something more, something dangerous. By late 2007, Elena and David had embarked on a full-fledged affair. They were careful, meeting in secret whenever they could, always ensuring that no one would suspect a thing. Their relationship was passionate, filled with the excitement of stolen moments and the thrill of being caught. For the first time in years, Elena felt alive, desired, and wanted. Everything came crashing down on April 3rd, 2008, when Elena Rodriguez was found dead in her home by her husband, Miguel, who had returned from work earlier than usual. Her body was discovered in the kitchen, lying in a pool of blood with a single stab to the chest. Miguel immediately called 911, his voice frantic as he tried to comprehend the horror before him. Nashville Police Department arrived at the Rodriguez residence early the next morning. Detective Juan Garcia, known for his thorough investigative methods, was assigned to the case. The crime scene was meticulously examined, and while the initial impression pointed to a burglary, the absence of forced entry and the specific targeting of Elena suggested overkill. Neighbors were interviewed, but no one was seen or hearing anything. 2 days later, on April 6, 2008, Detective Garcia began questioning those closest to Elena, starting with her husband, Miguel. Miguel sat across from Garcia in a small, dimly lit interview at the police station. His face was a mask of grief, his eyes red from days of trauma. He appeared genuinely devastated by his wife's death, insisting that he had no enemies and couldn't imagine who would want to hurt Elena. When asked about their relationship, Miguel admitted that things hadn't been perfect. Elena had seemed distant in recent months, but he had attributed it to the stress of managing the household and raising their children while he worked long hours. Garcia pressed Miguel about his whereabouts on the day. Miguel explained that he had been at work all day, leaving early in the morning and returning home around 5 p.m. when he discovered Elena's body. He provided the names of his colleagues who could confirm his alibi. Garcia followed up with Miguel's employer and co-workers, all of whom confirmed that Miguel had been on the job site from 7 a.m. until nearly 5 p.m. With Miguel's alibi solidly in place, Garcia had to look elsewhere for answers. Next, Detective Garcia turned his attention to Elena's cousin, Victoria, and her husband, David Cortez. The interview took place at the Cortez home, where the couple sat together on their living room sofa, their hands clasped tightly. Victoria was visibly shaken, her voice trembling as she described her relationship with Elena. She spoke of how close they had been, more like sisters than cousins. But in recent months, Victoria had noticed a change in Elena. She had become more withdrawn, less communicative, and seemed to carry a weight that she refused to share. Victoria attributed it to possible marital trouble, but had never pressed Elena for details. David Cortez, on the other hand, appeared more composed. He expressed shock at Elena's death and insisted that he could not imagine who would do such a thing. When asked about his whereabouts on the day of the murder, David claimed that he had been in a business meeting for most of the day. He provided details of the meeting and the names of the people who could vouch for him. Detective Garcia noted David's calm demeanor throughout the questioning. Unlike Victoria, who was visibly distraught, David seemed in control of his emotions, which struck Garcia as somewhat unusual given the circumstances. As Garcia wrapped up the interviews, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than what had been revealed. Victoria's account of Elena's recent behavior hinted at underlying issues, and David's calmness in the face of such a tragedy was unsettling. Garcia knew he had to dig deeper. He instructed his team to verify David's alibi and to keep a close eye on both him and Miguel as the investigation continued. As the investigation continued, Detective Garcia and his team worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading up to Elena Rodriguez's death. On April 8, 2008, their efforts began to bear fruit when they uncovered a significant lead. During a routine examination of Elena's phone records, Garcia noticed a series of text messages that stood out. The messages, which were flirtatious and intimate in nature, were exchanged with a contact saved in her system. This discovery immediately raised red flags for Garcia, who suspected that messages could be crucial to understanding what had happened. The texts revealed a side of Elena that no one had known, a passionate, secretive relationship that had been carefully hidden from both her husband, Miguel, and her cousin, Victoria. Garcia ordered his team to trace the number associated with the pseudonym, hoping it would lead to more answers. When the trace came back, the number was linked to David Cortez, Victoria's husband. The revelation shocked Garcia, as it indicated that Elena had been involved in an affair with her own cousin's husband for nearly a year. The affair had been conducted with extreme caution. Elena and David communicated primarily through these coded messages, and only met in places where they were unlikely to be seen together. Their relationship had provided Elena with the attention and affection she craved, but it had also placed her in a dangerous situation. The fact that David was married to Victoria and Elena was married to Miguel made their affair a ticking time bomb that could destroy both families. 2 days later, on April 10, 2008, David Cortez was brought back into question. This time, Detective Garcia approached the interview with a different strategy. Armed with the evidence of the affair, Garcia was determined to push David into revealing more. As the interview began, David maintained a calm and composed demeanor, but Garcia wasted no time confronting him with the text messages. Initially, David denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the messages were harmless and that there was nothing more to them. However, as Garcia pressed him with more details, David's composure began to crack. The weight of the evidence became impossible to ignore. Under pressure, David finally admitted to the affair. He confessed that their relationship had been intense and filled with passion, but he insisted that it was nothing more than a fun. David claimed that he had never intended to leave Victoria, and that he had ended the relationship with Elena just weeks before. He portrayed the affair as a mistake, something that had spiraled out of control, but, according to him, was now in the past. With this new information, Garcia turned his attention to Victoria. When she was questioned, Victoria broke down. She admitted that she had suspected David of infidelity for some time, but she had never imagined that it could involve her own cousin. Victoria revealed that she had noticed changes in David's behavior, his frequent absences, his secretive phone calls, but she had never confronted him directly. Despite her suspicions, Victoria had not David's reassurances until Garcia presented her with the truth. The revelation devastated her, but she had no further information that directly implicated David in Elena's murder. Her world was shattered by the betrayal, but she was as much in the dark about the murder as the investigators had been. David was adamant and kept on insisting he had nothing to do with the murder, but everyone knew the truth. What happened was that on the morning of April 3rd, 2008, when Miguel left for work as usual, unaware that his world was about to come crashing down, Elena and David had planned to meet that day. David told Victoria he had a meeting with a client, and Elena sent the children to school, eagerly awaiting David's arrival. She made sure the house was spotless, her appearance perfect, everything just right for their rendezvous. David arrived at the Rodriguez home around noon. Elena greeted him at the door, and they quickly found themselves in each other's arms. But something happened while they made love. Elena moaned her husband's name, and this changed everything because the mood was ruined, and she suddenly began to feel guilty. Clearly, she still loved her husband. What was she even doing? She asked herself. There was a tension in the air, a sense of urgency that neither of them could quite place. Perhaps it was the mounting guilt, or the growing fear of being discovered, but their usual passion was tinged with something darker. They argued briefly. Elena was becoming increasingly paranoid about their affair being exposed, and she was no longer comfortable and wanted to end it, while David insisted that they could continue as long as they were careful. The argument quickly escalated, fueled by jealousy, frustration, and the pressure of their secret. That was when Elena threatened to tell his wife and cousin if he didn't agree to leave her. In a moment of blind rage, David grabbed a knife from the kitchen. What happened next? Before either of them realized it, Elena was on the floor, blood pooling around her. The knife fell from David's hand. Panicked, David fled the scene, picking up the knife. He didn't bother to wipe it down, too consumed by fear to think clearly. He ran to his car, his mind racing with the realization of what he had done. Ellen, the woman he had claimed to love, was now lying dead in her own kitchen, the life drained to the case. Following these revelations, the investigation took on a new sense of urgency. Detective Garcia and his team worked to gather more evidence that could link David Cortez to the murder. On April 12, 2008, they made a breakthrough. Surveillance footage from a store near the Rodriguez residence was reviewed, and it showed David Cortez in the vicinity on the day. The footage contradicted David's earlier statement that he had been at a business meeting during that time. When Garcia investigated further, he discovered that the meeting David claimed to attend had been canceled, unraveling David's alibi. In addition to the surveillance footage, forensic analysis of the crime scene revealed a partial fingerprint on the back door of the Rodriguez house. The fingerprint was matched to David, but when questioned, David claimed that it must have been left during a previous visit to the house. Garcia was skeptical of this explanation, especially considering the growing pile of evidence against David. By April 15, 2008, Detective Garcia had gathered enough evidence to move forward. The surveillance footage, the fingerprint, the unraveling of David's alibi, and the motive provided by the affair painted a damning picture. Garcia obtained a warrant for David Cortez's arrest. That afternoon, David was taken into custody without incident and charged with the murder of Elena Rodriguez. The arrest sent fear through both families and the entire community. The affair, which had been carefully hidden for nearly a year, was now exposed, and the consequences were devastating. David's actions had not only taken Elena's life, but had also destroyed his own marriage and shattered the trust between the two families. As David sat in his cell, awaiting trial, the reality of his actions began to sink in. What had started as a secret affair had spiraled into a deadly conflict, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. As the case prepared to go to trial, the prosecution built a solid case against David Cortez. They painted him as a man who couldn't handle the pressure of his divorce and chose murder to protect us. The defense, however, argued that there was no concrete proof that David had killed Elena and suggested that someone else with knowledge of the affair could have framed him. On May 5th, 2008, the trial of David Cortez began, drawing widespread attention from both the media and the community. The courtroom was packed, with people eager to see how the case would unfold. Reporters lined the hallways, and the trial became a topic of daily conversation in Nashville, Tennessee. prosecution wasted no time in laying out their case against David. They presented a detailed timeline of events, supported by a mountain of evidence. The text messages between Elena and David were a key part of the prosecution's argument, clearly showing their faith and the escalating tension between them. These messages painted a picture of a relationship that had become increasingly volatile in the weeks leading up to his death. Surveillance footage was shown next, capturing David near the Rodriguez home on the day of the murder. This evidence directly contradicted David's claim that he had been at a business meeting, which the prosecution pointed out had been canceled. The footage placed David at the scene when he claimed to be elsewhere, casting serious doubt on his credibility. The prosecution also presented forensic evidence, including the partial fingerprint found on the back door of the Rodriguez house. The fingerprint matched David's, placing him at the scene in a way that could not be explained away as a previous visit. This physical evidence was critical in linking David directly to the crime. Witnesses were called to the stand to testify about the deteriorating relationships between the two couples. Neighbors and friends described how Elena and Miguel had grown distant and how David's behavior had changed as he became more secretive and withdrawn. These testimonies helped establish a motive, suggesting that David was under immense pressure as his affair with Elena began to unravel. Miguel Rodriguez's testimony was one of the most emotional moments of the trial. He recounted the day he found his wife's body, his voice heavy with grief and disbelief. He spoke of his shock not only at her death, but also at discovering her affair with David. Miguel's testimony added a personal and heartbreaking dimension to the case, reminding everyone of the real human cost of the crime. Victoria Cortez also took the stand. Her testimony was a mix of betrayal and sorrow. She described how she had always trusted David, but had suspected something was wrong the months leading up to his death. Victoria spoke about her confrontation with David after his arrest, where the full extent of his lies became clear. She explained how their marriage, once strong, had crumbled under the weight of his dissent. Victoria's pain was palpable as she recounted how David's actions had shattered their lives. Throughout the trial, the prosecution argued that David Cortez had acted out of desperation. Faced with the threat of Elena exposing their affair and destroying his marriage, David chose to silence her permanently. The evidence, both physical and testimonial, painted a picture of a man who had been pushed to the edge and made a deadly decision to protect his secrets. As the trial progressed, the jury listened intently, aware that they were deciding the fate of a man that torn two families. The evidence was overwhelming, and the case against David was strong. The community watched and waited, knowing that the outcome of this trial would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. After weeks of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. David Cortez was found guilty of second-degree murder. The evidence, though circumstantial in some areas, was strong enough to convince the jury of his guilt. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. In the wake of the trial, Victoria filed for divorce from David, leaving behind the life they had built together. She moved away from Nashville, seeking to start anew away from the painful memories. Miguel Rodriguez, still reeling from the loss of his wife and the betrayal, continued to live in the house where the tragedy occurred. a constant reminder of the life he once had.
Sign me up.
The neighborhood, once vibrant and close-knit, was left haunted by the events. Whispers of the affair and murder lingered long after the trial, a cautionary tale of how easily secrets could turn deadly. The story of Elena Rodriguez's tragic death is a stark reminder of the dangers of deceit and the lengths people will go to protect their secrets. In the end, the affair that was supposed to be a secret passion became a deadly obsession. But this is nothing compared to the case where housewife's secret affair with neighbor's son ends in death. The unending family and neighborhood drama continues. So give it a watch and subscribe for more.